Hi students, let us learn more about the LRAC and the minimum efficient scale and the graphs that represent them. So there are three scenarios in your notes which may be confusing. So today we will walk through these three together. So the first scenario is that some firms can reap substantial internal economies of scale, and due to that they tend to be very large firms. This is represented by a graph whereby the QMES is quite far to the right. On the other hand, we have firms that only have limited internal economies of scale. These tend to be small firms and the QMES tends to be further to the left. And the last one, this oddly shaped, saucer-shaped curve, whereby the QMES is reached at Q1, but the cost does not go up until around Q2, whereby the internal diseconomies of scale start to kick in. So let us recall the generic LRAC you were first introduced to. So it's basically a U-shaped curve with a minimum point of the LRAC, which you would draw dotted lines down to the x-axis to find your QMES. After which you basically can find the lowest possible average cost in this company. Now this curve is used to show that when quantity naught increases to quantity 1, your cost also decreases from C0 to C1, thereby showing that as scale increases, your average cost drops, and internal economies of scale is evidenced here. Moving on to the other scenario of the large firm, whereby it can reap substantial internal economies of scale. We show that visually by making the graph look like this, whereby the LRAC is kind of tilted to the right and your QMES is tilted to the right. Okay, so visually the distance between the QMES and the point of origin is rather far. Okay, and then you can show that there is significant room for you to increase your output before you hit the QMES from Q0 to Q1 and then further from Q1 to Q2, and your cost keeps decreasing from C0 to C1 to C2. On the other end of the spectrum, you have firms that can only reap limited internal economies of scale. So these are generally small firms. So in this situation, you realize the graph, we will tilt the QMES a bit to the left, or rather significantly to the left, depending on how you draw it. Okay, so this is to show that we only can increase our quantity by a little bit before we eventually hit the QMES. So visually there's not much room for me to further increase output here before I hit the QMES. Now move on to this oddly shaped, saucer-shaped LRAC. Now in this particular curve, you reach your MES at Q1, okay, fairly quickly. But then there is a whole range, okay, of quantity points here, okay, which is considered the QMES. And it's only at Q2 when your diseconomies, or rather your internal diseconomies of scale sets in and your cost starts to go up. So in this particular scenario, a firm can choose to be relatively small, okay, to produce at Q1, or relatively large to produce at Q2. Now whether or not they do that is no longer depending on cost decisions. It will be depending on other reasons like revenue advantages or their goals of having larger market share. So discuss with your friends, okay, or try and look around you and think about what industries have such coexistence of large and small firms. Okay, so you can write your examples in the comments below and we will respond and have a good discussion about this. Alright, thank you for watching. That's it. I hope you've learned something. If you have any queries, please ask your tutors or leave a comment below. Thanks and happy learning.